Here to share insights on the power of saying no and drawing from his entrepreneurial journey, Scott Holmes will explore how creating clear boundaries can fuel productivity, protect well-being, and set the stage for long-term success. Please welcome to the stage, Scott Holmes.
Thanks, you guys. The program said starting at 11:30, so I don't blame anybody for being late. So today we're going to talk about the successful boundaries that I have learned by creating a to-don't list. To use a sports vernacular, so imagine, we'll take football as an example. Knowing where the boundaries are, the out-of-bounds lines, knowing that you're not supposed to jump off sides before the ball snaps, knowing that you can't hit somebody on a pass until they've touched the ball. These are the kinds of things that will make you more successful in the game of football. Knowing that in basketball, you can't take more than 2 steps after a dribble, unless you're in the NBA, is another boundary. So let me tell you a story about how I came across these boundaries. I was in my mid-20s. I was between my senior and senior year in college at Utah State. And yes, 2 senior years because that's just kind of how I roll. My intention was to go to medical school, and getting good grades was super important for me. So I took the slower route just to make sure I could get straight A's. During that summer, between my senior and senior year, I got a job back then in Utah County, working for a guy just doing manual labor. Thought I'd make, at that time, $12 an hour seemed like a lot. And I'd work that summer and head back up to Utah State. So one of the first things I noticed about this guy that I went to work for in Alpine was this. He had a garage full of these Corvettes. They were all red. And they were immaculate. Every day he would take that brush, I don't even know what it's called anymore, it's really soft, and he would dust off his Corvettes, and that's literally how they looked. Nice and shiny. And I thought, okay, this guy pays attention to detail. And I thought, I do too. I'm a stickler for detail. This is going to be a good relationship. And it was. We ended up being not just boss and employee, but super good friends. And on occasion, we would take this out. He had a Cessna Turbo 210. And we'd fly around the valley. Sometimes we'd fly over to Wendover and get a buffet. And I thought, man, this guy is living right. And if you have an airplane, you have a boat. And if you have a boat, you have Sea-Doos or jet skis. One day, I was working late at his house. And he came home late, like at 8 o'clock at night. And I was working that late because we had a project due the next morning because another sub was going to come in. And he lived in the basement of his house. It was like a 14,000 square foot house. The basement was completely finished. He lived there with his wife and his 6 kids. And I was helping him doing the finishing touches on the upper 3 floors. So I'd get there early in the morning. He'd roll out of bed 9:30, 10 o'clock, come upstairs, work with me for a couple hours. Then he'd head off to work. Well, this particular day, he got home really quite late, as did I, and I was leaving quite late. And so I asked him, Gary, what are you getting home so late for? And he said, oh, I was flying this thing around. And I thought to myself, wait, he's getting home at 8 o'clock at night. His wife's downstairs with 6 kids. And I made a mental note. As much as I liked this guy, and as much as I admired him, as much fun as I had in that particular plane of his, I made a mental note that, you know what, one of these days I'm going to get married. I wasn't married yet. But when I do get married, I'm going to not marry things. I'm going to marry a person and focus on that person and focus on what comes from that relationship. few mornings later, he comes upstairs and he goes, Scott, I have a dilemma. And I thought to myself, well, I'm in my mid-20s. This guy's in his 40s. How am I going to help this guy? And he says, should I buy this Learjet, different one, not quite that big, or should I buy a helicopter? And I thought to myself, holy cow, his definition of dilemma and my definition of dilemma are completely different. The next thing that went through my head was, man, if this is how this guy defines dilemma, I might want to learn more from him about what he's doing. Because I would love to have that dilemma. And again, mental note, but I decided, much to my mom's chagrin, pretty much right then and there, I was not going to return to college. I was that close to getting my degree in biology, but I was much closer to getting my degree from this guy, my School of Hard Knocks degree. I was really intrigued by what he did for a living. He was importing product from Asia. Well, I gave him the wrong advice. I suggested he might want to consider the Learjet, because who wants a buffet in Wendover when you can have a steak in Chicago or pizza in New York? My advice he didn't take. He ended up buying the helicopter. Turned out to be a great purchase for him, because he would fly from his house in Alpine to his office on 33rd South right during the lead up to the Olympics that we had here. Remember the freeways? Those are who are old enough. Remember the freeways were just completely torn up? He avoided all of that by taking that helicopter and flying it from Alpine to his work on 33rd South in Salt Lake. So, my first mental to don't. I didn't yet carry a notebook around like I do, like I ended up doing much later, but I made a mental note, don't marry things, because you want to marry this. Yeah. Now, side note, it happens to be this person's birthday today. So, another to don't. Don't ever agree to a speaking engagement on your wife's birthday. With one exception, and that's the One Utah Summit in Cedar City. Incidentally, walking over here this morning, she came with me, because we're going to go have some fun after this. Walking over, she gave me 3 to-don'ts, just in the 3-minute walk from that parking lot over here. Scott, you tend to clear your throat a lot. Don't do that. So I will not do that into the microphone, at least. Don't chew gum. I said, okay, I'll spit it out. I was going to anyway. And then she gave me a third to-don't, which I won't tell you right now. I'll tell you later, because it was in my slide. I have to chuckle at it, because she's right, again. Anyway, we had 8 kids together, just had our 4th grandkid. You see 3 of them in this picture, but we just had one a couple weeks ago. This is what you marry. You don't marry things. So you prioritize people over things. That to don't gave me the boundary to remember that people are far more important than things. So once I eventually ended up carrying around a notebook, remember those Franklin planners before iPhones? Carry one of those around, and in the back of the Franklin planner or the back of the notebook, because you write your to-dos on the front, right? We all write to-dos. We love the endorphin hit when you can mark off a to-do. I'm no different, but the to-don'ts seemed more permanent, and so I'd write those in the back of the book, knowing that I would never really turn past that page. As I added more to-don'ts, I would just go to the back of the book, and there would have my list, and this was the first thing on my list. I remembered the story I told you, and I put, don't marry things. Well, I ended up getting into the import business, working for a company who, among other things, imported, you can see in the background, camping gear, you can see in the foreground, small hand tools, and sunglasses. You might think, man, that diversity is pretty good. Well, the problem is, you sell the camping gear to places like Sportsman's Warehouse. You sell the small hand tools to places like Ace Hardware or Home Depot. And you sell the sunglasses on consignment to convenience stores around the country. And what would happen is, as one category would do well, the company would take the money from that category that was doing well and supplement the categories that weren't doing so well. And it put the company in a lot of duress, and they ended up selling under duress to another company down in Texas, who, again, I ended up working for and just commuting back and forth. Well, this company put the diversification game on steroids because they also had fishing, they also had paintball, and probably 2 or 3 other categories I can't remember at the time. And I remember thinking, having working for both these companies, you know what, these are all good ideas, but they keep getting distracted by good ideas. So Scott, don't get distracted. If you ever go into business, don't get distracted by good ideas. Because what happens when you get distracted by good ideas, it means you can't do the great ideas. And I learned this firsthand, having worked for both those companies, that they were in a position, they had said yes too many times to good ideas, that they were forced to therefore say no to great ideas, which would have been to double down, triple down, quadruple down on the categories that were doing well. I've learned from a local author, homegrown, you guys might have heard of him, Dave Crenshaw wrote a book called The Myth of Multitasking. And in that book, he talks about mastery before diversification. We always hear that diversification is great, and it is. But it can also be a problem. Let's go back to our sports example. Let's take Michael Jordan, right? Or LeBron James, take your pick. That guy is a master. Those guys are masters at one thing. Now, Michael, on the other hand, decided that he was going to play baseball, but that was only after he had reached the highest level of mastery in basketball. And the universe rewards mastery in a specific field. None of us care that LeBron James can't work a spreadsheet. We just don't care about that because he is a master in his craft. So this book taught this concept of mastery before diversification. And so what did I do? I turned to the back of my book and I added another to don't, realizing that the most powerful word in business is not yes, it's no. So one of the other things I noticed working for this factory, or for this company, was that they would swap, what I call factory hop, based on price. So you'd get associated with a factory making product in Asia, and then they would hop to another factory because that factory happened to have a better price by a couple percent. Well, the problem was that is if you want to have quality product, remember my attention to detail? I mean, I would train these factories. I want exactly 7 stitches per linear inch. That's how I want you to set your sewing machine. Well, you switch factories, you got to start all over in teaching this factory how to make products. So your quality level drops dramatically when you factory hop. So I turned to the back of the book and I wrote, don't factory hop. Scott, if you're ever going to get into business yourself, these are your to-don'ts that are going to give you some boundaries. Well, I also noticed that managing inventory was a difficulty for them. I wasn't responsible for it, but I could see it from having worked for the business that managing inventory was an issue. And I didn't know the first thing about it. So I went to the back of my book and I wrote, don't manage inventory. If you ever get into business, don't manage inventory. I noticed another problem. And you guys have probably experienced this, whether you've ran a company or worked for a company, HR issues exist, right? Whether it's a crappy manager or whether it's the opposite or both. HR, just from being humans, there are HR issues. So I thought, you know what, Scott, you don't know how to manage inventory. You don't know how to manage people. So don't have employees either. And I put that in the back of my book. Yeah, so you can start seeing how my boundaries started getting narrower and narrower and narrower. Well, sure enough, some of these things that I had on my to-don't list started causing problems for the company I was working for. And they ended up missing, late paying factories, which meant to late shipping to customers. And eventually it led to missing payroll. And that was my message. You know what, Scott, you gotta leave and go do your own thing. So I went to my factories, went to my main customer, Sportsman's Warehouse. The president of Sportsman's Warehouse to this day is a dear friend. And I proposed this idea to them about this, starting a business with these strict to-don'ts, and could you support me? And I got yeses from both of them. So I, for the first 3 years of business, starting in 2005, would ship full container loads of product directly to their distribution center, because my to-don't was don't have a warehouse and don't have employees. So I managed the whole business for 3 years by myself, not having a single piece of inventory and not having an employee. Well, that caused a problem. Because as good as Sportsman's Warehouse was at forecasting, they weren't perfect. And so if they oversold what I shipped to them, and they were waiting another month for the next container to arrive, they were out of stock. Well, that can't happen. So they would end up having my competitor's product on the shelf. And I thought to myself, what happens when a to-don't needs to become a to-do? There's got to be a process where you can take a to-don't and have it become a to-do. So I started reading voraciously. Audible had come out. I'm a biker. I love to bike. And so I put Audible on, and I ended up reading a series of books, all of which here I read, and for different reasons, highly recommend them. But the first two I read were Delivering Happiness by Tony Hsieh. He was the founder. He was the CEO of Zappos, not the founder, but the CEO. And a book called Start With Why, which most of you guys have read. And that got me really thinking about the things that make me tick, which led to a discovery of my 7 core values, which I remember with the acronym FORWARD. These are the 7 core values that now that I have employees, I have realized that the best way to manage employees is for them to understand your why, for them to understand what makes you tick, because the business's core value is really a reflection of its founder. So we started having some pretty good success by moving some of these things from the to-don't list to the to-do list. Not all of them, but the necessary ones. The having employees piece was super necessary because I realized I was becoming my own ceiling. And now I'm surrounded by people way smarter than I am who I lean on heavily to allow me to do these sort of things. You know, in the middle of the workday, I can come and share some of these thoughts with you while they're still cranking on the business. If you end up having a modicum of success, and this was the third to-don't that my wife gave me when we were walking across the street, don't be too full of yourself. And that happens to match really well with the 5th core value, always learning, never learned. That's one of our mantras, that we're just always in learning mode. And so I chuckle at this, don't get too full of yourself. I think she said it a different way on the way over. She goes, I can't even remember now. It was either be humble or, don't brag. I don't know what it was, but it made me chuckle because I totally agree with her. Who likes that? So, yeah, don't get too full of yourself. And I'm speaking to myself. So you can see this to-don't list ended up having some things that were checked off. And that is my message to you, is that create these to-don'ts, set some boundaries for yourself, and when you need to transition something from your to-don't list to a to-do, just learn how to do it. Surround yourself with the right people, read the right books, answers are there, move the necessary things to your to-do list, and it allows you to help expand your business. So thank you very much. Now, if you'll indulge me with one last thing, because it is my wife's birthday. And it's not just any birthday, it's the big 5-0. I don't see her in the audience, but man, I hope she's here, because I want you to help me sing happy birthday to her. Will you do that for me? All right. Okay, her name is Chrissy, no T. Where is she? Hi, honey. You didn't tell me not to do this. This is not on the to-don't list. But I promise you, I'm going to hear about this. But I have to do it anyway. So indulge me. Let me get my camera out. I'm going to record you guys singing happy birthday to my wife.
Get her up on the stage.
Wasn't my idea. At least come stand right here. Oh, she's going to kill me. We threw a big surprise party for her last night. She didn't know about it. And, it went great. But afterwards, she was like, yeah, the last time you did that, I told you not to do that. So, yeah. All right, let's do this. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Chrissy. Thank you.